What if I told you that the man Rome once called the Great, a man who commanded entire seas, brought kings to their knees, and held the love of the people, would end up abandoned, betrayed, and stabbed to death in front of his wife and child? This isn't just history. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and one of the greatest rivalries the ancient world has ever seen. This is Pompey the Great. Today, we are uncovering the rise and fall of Pompey, a man whose fame rivaled Alexander the Great, but whose end was as humiliating as it was tragic. By the end of this video, you'll see why Pompey's story is not just about glory. It's about how power, when threatened, turns allies into enemies. And here's the kicker. His greatest enemy wasn't Caesar. It was his own pride. Pompey was born in 106 BC into a wealthy Roman family. His father was a general, and young Pompey grew up in the shadow of Rome's brutal civil wars. But Pompey wasn't content to just watch from the sidelines. By his early 20s, he raised his own army. Think about that. At the age most of us are just figuring out life, Pompey was already being called the teenage butcher for his ruthless efficiency. Brutal, yes, but it worked. His victories brought him glory, and Rome couldn't get enough of him. That glory only grew when he defeated Rome's enemies in Africa and Spain. Parading through the city in a triumph normally reserved for much older, seasoned generals, Pompey wasn't just winning battles. He was rewriting the rules. The Senate hated it. They saw a young man who bent traditions and used popularity as a weapon. But the people loved him, and in Rome, that love was more dangerous than swords. Then came the pirates. Rome's grain supply was being strangled. The people were starving, and chaos was brewing. The Senate, desperate but wary, handed Pompey near absolute power to crush the threat. And in just 3 months, he did what no one thought possible. He wiped the seas clean. That wasn't just a victory, it was a message. Pompey wasn't just a general, he was a savior. But here's the tension. The more powerful Pompey became, the more dangerous he looked to Rome's elites. He had armies, the adoration of the crowd, and a hunger for recognition. He needed allies. Enter Julius Caesar and Crassus. Together, they formed the First Triumvirate, a shadow government that controlled Rome from the inside. On the outside, they smiled. But behind closed doors, each man was waiting for the chance to dominate the others. Crassus's death left the field open. Caesar's conquest of Gaul turned him into Rome's new superstar. And Pompey, he found himself fading into the background of his own story. This is where everything flips. The Senate, terrified of Caesar, courted Pompey as their champion. For Pompey, this was a trap disguised as honor. He chose pride over friendship, and the bond between him and Caesar shattered. When Caesar marched his legions across the Rubicon, defying the Senate, Pompey had a choice: stand his ground or retreat. And here's where the controversy begins. Pompey had the numbers, the resources, and the Senate behind him. Yet he fled. He retreated to Greece, planning to regroup. Was this strategy? Or was it fear? Historians still debate it. But what's clear is this: Pompey hesitated, and Caesar never hesitated. The two finally clashed at Pharsalus in 48 BC. Pompey's army outnumbered Caesar's almost 2-1. On paper, this should have been Pompey's moment of triumph, but instead, his leadership faltered. He stuck to cautious plans, while Caesar took risks. The result? Pompey's forces were crushed. The Great was suddenly just a man on the run. Here's the part that feels like a Greek tragedy. Pompey fled to Egypt, expecting refuge. But instead of safety, he found betrayal. The Egyptians, desperate to win Caesar's favor, lured Pompey off his ship. In front of his wife and son, they stabbed him to death. No battle, no glory. Just a knife in the back, and his body left in the sand. When Caesar arrived and was shown Pompey's severed head, he reportedly wept, not out of love, but because even he knew the end of Pompey was too pitiful for a man once called the Great. So here's the bigger question. Was Pompey's downfall caused by Caesar, or by himself? His career shows us a man who rose by breaking rules, by using his image, by riding the wave of public adoration. But when it came to real strategy, when it came to facing an equal, Pompey blinked. His pride tied him to the Senate, his caution betrayed his armies, and his end exposed the ugly truth of Roman politics. Power is never shared. Pompey's story isn't just about one man's fall. It's a reminder that greatness built on reputation can collapse in an instant. He was a master of winning glory, but when the storm hit, he couldn't control it. His life forces us to ask, was Pompey ever truly great? Or was he just lucky until he wasn't? From a teenage butcher to Rome's savior, from Caesar's ally to his doomed rival, Pompey the Great is one of history's most controversial figures. And his tragic fall proves that in the game of Roman politics, there were no heroes, only survivors. If you want to see how Julius Caesar turned Pompey's fall into his own rise to absolute power, don't miss the next video popping up now.